In the heart of Boise, Idaho, a life I had meticulously built was about to be put to the ultimate test. My name is Eleanor Vance, a financial analyst, 32 years of age, and a firm believer in the power of independence. For 6 years, I have called this city home, thriving in a cozy apartment I purchased with my own earnings. My life is small but my own hardwood floors, a wide window overlooking the city lights, and a quiet space to think and breathe. It's a testament to every late night, every penny saved, and every sacrifice I've made to build a life on my terms. That day was supposed to be a warm and joyful Thanksgiving dinner, a rare visit home to see the people who raised me. Instead, it became a brutal lesson in betrayal. My parents, Janet and Robert, handed me a gift. Inside the carefully wrapped box was not a token of affection, but a notice for my brother Dean's staggering $250,000 debt from a failed business venture. My father's eyes, cold and unflinching, glared at me. "You're gonna pay this," he commanded. I stood my ground and refused. In an instant, his rage erupted, and he threw a glass of wine directly at my face, the dark liquid splashing against me, soaking my shirt. My mother screamed, "Get out!" I stood frozen, the wine dripping down my chin, unable to comprehend the cruel irony of the moment. This was my own family, my dear friends. Have you ever felt the pain of betrayal from the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Have you ever had to choose between your own hard-won security and a family's relentless demands? This is not just a story of a Thanksgiving gone wrong. It is a testament to the strength we find when we are forced to stand alone, to the quiet power of a firm. No. To understand why I drew that line, you must first understand the life that led me to that moment. A week prior, I was packing my camping gear, ready for a weekend retreat into the breathtaking Sawtooth National Forest. I had looked forward to this trip for weeks, a chance to hike with my cherished friends, sleep under a canvas of stars, and escape the relentless pressure of my career. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. "Come to Idaho Falls for Thanksgiving. We miss you." I froze, staring at the screen. It had been 2 years since I had last visited my parents' home. Not since the last holiday, where my brother, Dean, stole the spotlight as he always did. Growing up, I was an anomaly in our family. My brother was the golden child, the captain of the football team, the charming boy who could do no wrong. I was the quiet one, the diligent student who studied late into the night, saving every penny from my summer jobs. My mother would often say, "You're so responsible, Eleanor," but her words never felt like praise. They felt like a weight, a heavy expectation that I was meant to carry everyone else's burdens. I would sit on the couch, rereading her message, memories of my childhood flooding my mind, summers in Idaho Falls, helping my mother in the kitchen while Dean goofed off with my father. We would roll out dough for pies, and for a moment, I would feel like I belonged. But those moments were rare. Most of the time, I was invisible, overshadowed by my brother's loud presence. The last time I visited, he had bragged about some grand real estate deal, while my parents hung on his every word. I simply smiled and nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. I had learned long ago that speaking up got me nowhere. Part of me wanted to ignore the text. I had already made plans. But another part, the one that still held a fragile hope for a real family, couldn't let it go. What if this time was different? What if they actually wanted me there, not just as a fallback plan? I called my friend Maya to cancel. "You're ditching us for your family," she teased, but her voice had an edge. "They don't deserve you, Eleanor." Her words stung, a painful reminder of my friend's concern. They had heard the stories of my family's endless expectations, my brother's reckless spending, and my parents' blind support for him. Still, I told myself this was a chance to reconnect, to feel a part of something again. I texted my mother back. "I'll be there." She sent a heart emoji, and for a second, I felt a flicker of warmth. But as I unpacked my camping gear, doubts crept in. Why now? They hadn't called or texted in months, not even for my birthday. My brother's name kept popping into my head. He was always the reason for these sudden invites. The last time I saw him, he had hinted at financial trouble, but my father brushed it off, saying, "He's got it under control." I didn't believe it. My brother had always been careless, spending money as if it were an endless resource. I pushed the thought away, telling myself I was overthinking. This was just a family dinner, a chance to sit at the table, share a meal, and maybe, just maybe, feel like I belonged. I started packing for Idaho Falls, a 3-hour drive away. I chose a simple, respectable sweater, a quiet statement that I was coming as myself, not the perfect daughter they sometimes expected. As I folded my clothes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My mother's text was too short, too formal, like it was a rehearsed line. My gut told me there was more to this invitation, but I chose to ignore it. I wanted to believe in that warm family moment, even if it felt like chasing a memory that might never have been real. I stopped in front of my parents' house, my heart racing with a mix of hope and unease. I grabbed the gifts from the back seat: a fine bottle of wine for my father, a silk scarf for my mother, and a new finance book for my sister-in-law, Bethany. I had spent hours choosing them, wanting to show that I cared, even if I wasn't sure they did. As I walked up the porch steps, the front door swung open and my father, Robert, wrapped his arms around me in a tight hug. "You made it," he said, his voice warm but louder than I remembered. My mother appeared behind him, taking my coat with a smile that felt a little too wide. "It's been too long," she said, guiding me inside. The house smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, a scent that pulled me back to childhood Thanksgivings. Dean and his wife Bethany were already in the living room. My brother flashed his usual charming grin, the one that always got him out of trouble. "Hey, sis," he said, clapping my shoulder like we were old friends. My sister-in-law nodded, her smile polite but distant, her eyes scanning me as if she were taking my measure. I handed out the gifts, and they thanked me, my father admiring the wine, my mother wrapping the scarf around her neck, and my sister-in-law flipping through the book with a quick "thanks." It felt rehearsed, like they were playing parts in a script I hadn't read. We sat down to dinner at a table set, with my mother's best dishes, laden with a golden turkey, mashed potatoes, and green beans. It was the kind of spread that used to make me feel at home, back when I was a child. For a moment, I let myself believe we could have that again. I took a sip of wine, trying to relax, but my stomach twisted with unease. Their smiles were too bright, their questions too eager. My mother asked about my job, my apartment, my savings, things she had never cared about before. "You're doing so well," she said, her tone almost probing. My father nodded too quickly, as if he were waiting for a cue. My brother dominated the conversation, as always, talking about his latest real estate deal, a big project that sounded too good to be true. "It's a game changer," he said, leaning back in his chair. Bethany chimed in, praising his ambition, but her eyes kept darting to me. I forced a smile, but my mind was racing. I remembered the last time I saw him, how he had hinted at money troubles. Now his confidence felt forced, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I glanced at my mother, who was cutting her turkey with a careful precision, avoiding my gaze. My father laughed at something my brother said, but it sounded hollow. The tension grew with every passing moment. Every time I tried to steer the conversation to something neutral, they brought it back to my life, my finances, my plans. "You must have a nice nest egg by now," Bethany said, her voice casual but sharp. I brushed it off, saying I was careful with money, but the words felt heavy in my mouth. My brother leaned forward, his grin fading for a split second. "You're smart like that," he said, but it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a calculation. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. The warmth of the meal, the familiar smells, couldn't mask the unease creeping up my spine. I thought about the text from my mother, how it had pulled me here despite my doubts. I had wanted to believe in a real family moment, but now, sitting at this table, I felt like a stranger in a house I no longer knew. Their laughter, their questions, their glances, it all felt like a setup. I gripped my glass, trying to shake the thought, but it wouldn't leave. Whatever they wanted, it wasn't just a Thanksgiving dinner. After dinner, we moved to the living room for the gift exchange. The fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow, but the air felt heavy, as if the tension from the table had followed us. My mother handed out the presents, and they all thanked me again. their voices still sounding rehearsed. Dean leaned back on the couch, his arm around his wife, watching me with a look I couldn't quite read. "Your turn," my mother said, her smile tight as she handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. I took it expecting something simple, a trinket, a family keepsake. My fingers fumbled with the ribbon, and I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Inside the box was a single folded paper. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the text, and my heart stopped. It was a bank notice, official and cold, stating my brother owed $250,000 for a failed startup. I stared at the numbers, my mind racing to make sense of it. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low, looking up at my mother. She glanced at my father, who cleared his throat and leaned forward, his hands clasped. "It's your brother's debt," he said, his tone firm, like he was stating a fact I should already accept. "The business didn't work out. We need you to cover it." I blinked, the paper trembling in my hands. Dean's eyes were on me, unblinking, his charming grin completely gone. Bethany shifted closer to him, her face calm, but expectant. "You're doing so well, Eleanor," my mother said, her voice soft but sharp, as if she were trying to soothe me into agreement. "You've always been the responsible one. This is for the family." I looked at her, then at my father, then at my brother, waiting for someone to say this was a mistake. No one did. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as if I were being cornered. "How do you even know I can pay this?" I asked, my voice sharper now. Bethany spoke up, her tone matter of fact. "I work at the bank. I saw your savings. Our 700 Zalzers, you can afford it." My stomach dropped. She had accessed my private account, my private finances, without my permission. The violation hit me like a physical punch. I had spent years building that safety net, working late nights and skipping vacations, while my brother spent money on whatever he wanted. And now they were using my hard work against me, as if it were theirs to claim. "This isn't fair," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Why is this my problem?" My brother finally spoke, his voice smooth but edged with frustration. "Come on, sis, it's just money, we're family. You can't let us lose everything." His words stung, not because they were true, but because they weren't. Family didn't mean this lying, scheming, digging into my life as if I owed them. I looked at the bank notice again, the words, "failed startup," glaring at me. I didn't believe it. My brother's history of bad deals and flashy purchases flashed through my mind, but I had no proof. My father leaned closer, his face hardening. "You're sitting on all that money, and you're going to let your brother's life fall apart," he said. "What kind of daughter does that?" His words cut deep, not because I felt guilty, but because they confirmed what I had always feared. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as a solution, a checkbook to fix their mistakes. My mother nodded, her eyes pleading but cold. "We're counting on you," she said. "This is what families do." I pushed the paper back into the box, my hands steady now, despite the rage building inside. "No," I said, my voice clear. "I'm not paying this." The room went silent. My brother's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as if I had betrayed him. Bethany's calm mask slipped, her lips pressing into a thin line. My mother's face fell, but there was something else there, anger, or perhaps desperation. My father's hands clenched, his knuckles white. I could feel their judgment pressing down on me, but I held my ground. "You're being selfish?" Bethany said, her voice low, almost a hiss. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" I wanted to scream, to tell her she had no right to my money, my life. But I didn't. I just stared back, my heart pounding, feeling the full weight of their betrayal. They had planned this, all of them, before I had even walked through the door. The warm welcome, the dinner, the smiles. It was all a setup to trap me. I felt like a fool for hoping, for thinking this could be a real family moment. The box sat in my lap, heavy with their expectations, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. I pushed the box away, my voice firm. "I'm not paying his debt," I said, staring at my father, daring him to argue. His face twisted, a flush creeping up his neck. My mother's hands clenched on the coffee table, her eyes narrowing as if I had betrayed her. "My brother," Dean shot forward, his voice sharp. "You're really going to let us lose everything?" He snapped, his charm gone, replaced by a raw edge of desperation. My sister-in-law, Bethany, crossed her arms, her glare cold and accusing. "You're supposed to help family," she said, her words dripping with judgment, as if I had broken some unspoken vow. I shook my head, the crumpled bank notice still in my hand. "This is his mess," I said, pointing at my brother. "Why am I the one who has to clean it up?" My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the years of frustration boiling over. I had always been the one to fix things, to step up when they needed me, but this was different. This was my brother's failure, not mine, and I was done carrying their weight. The silence that followed was heavy, their eyes boring into me, waiting for me to crack. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. He grabbed his wine glass, his knuckles white around the stem. "You ungrateful child," he spat, his voice shaking with rage. Before I could move, he flung the wine at me. It splashed across my face, cold and sharp, stinging my eyes and soaking my shirt. The liquid dripped down my chin, pooling on the floor, and I stood frozen, the shock hitting me like a wave. My breath caught, my heart pounding as the reality of the moment sank in. My own father had done this, in front of everyone, without a hint of regret. My mother, Janet, gasped, but her face hardened almost instantly. She stood, her voice icy. "If you won't help your brother, you're not welcome here," she said, each word cutting deeper than the wine. "Get out." I stared at her, my chest tight, waiting for her to take it back, to show some flicker of guilt. She didn't. My brother looked away, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. My sister-in-law's lips twitched into a faint smirk, as if she had expected this all along. My grandfather, Walter, sat in the corner, his hands folded, watching silently, his face unreadable. The anger surged inside me, hot and unstoppable. "You're choosing him over me," I said, my voice low but steady, each word deliberate. "After everything I've done, this is how you treat me." I wiped the wine from my face, my sleeve now stained red, my hands trembling with fury. They had planned this, manipulated me from the moment I walked in, and now they were throwing me out because I wouldn't give in. The betrayal burned deeper than I had ever felt, but it also made something crystal clear. I didn't owe them anything. I grabbed my coat from the chair, my movements sharp, deliberate. "You don't get to do this?" I said, looking at my mother, then my father, then my brother. "You don't get to guilt me into fixing his mistakes." My brother opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "No, I'm done." My voice was louder now, fueled by years of being overlooked, of being the one who always had to be responsible. My sister-in-law scoffed, muttering something about me being selfish, but I didn't care. Her words couldn't touch me anymore. I walked toward the door, my wet shirt clinging to my skin, the smell of wine sharp in my nose. My father's face was still red, his hands clenched, but he didn't say a word. My mother stood rigid, her eyes cold as if I were a stranger. My brother stayed silent, his head bowed, avoiding my gaze. My grandfather's eyes followed me, but he didn't speak. Not yet. I wanted to scream, to tell them how wrong they were, but I didn't. Words wouldn't change them. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I stepped outside, the November air hitting my wet clothes, chilling me to the bone. My car was still in the driveway, right where I had left it hours ago when I had walked in, hoping for a family moment. That hope was gone now, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt before. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel, my anger still burning but mixed with something else, relief. I didn't look back as I started the engine. This was the end of their hold on me. My grandfather, Walter, rose to his feet, his voice slicing through the heavy silence. The living room, tense after my departure, seemed to shrink under his gaze. My father sat rigid, fists still clenched. My mother kept her eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding him. My brother shifted uneasily while my sister-in-law sat stiff, her face pale. For most of the evening, he had stayed quiet in the corner, just watching. But now, his presence filled every inch of the room. "I've had enough," he said, his voice low but sharp. "You think you can treat her like this and lie to everyone?" His trembling hand pointed at my father, then at my brother. "That debt wasn't from a startup, it was from gambling. Casinos in Nevada, cars, trips to Europe." His words struck like a slap. My mother's head snapped up, her mouth open, but speechless. My father's face went pale, his jaw tight. My brother tried to speak, but my grandfather cut him off with blazing eyes. Don't you dare deny it. Slowly, he paced across the floor, his cane tapping against the wood. I saw the transactions in the family account. 250,000 gone. Casinos, a BMW, flights to Paris. And I heard you. He turned toward my father, plotting with him to hide it, to trick Eleanor into paying. My sister-in-law's eyes widened, her hands twisting in her lap. She opened her mouth, but he silenced her with a raised hand. You knew too. You checked her savings and thought you could guilt her into fixing this mess. The accusation lingered, undeniable. My father rose, his voice shaky. You don't understand, but the old man cut him short. I understand plenty, he snapped. You threw wine in her face, told her to leave her own home, all to cover his lies. He pointed at my brother, who shrank back, stripped of his usual bravado. My mother covered her face, her shoulders trembling. My sister-in-law pressed her lips tight, no longer smirking. Their excuses collapsed under his fury. I raised you better than this. His voice broke. Eleanor's the only one who's been honest, and you treated her like dirt. His eyes softened for a moment, as if thinking of me. She deserves to know the truth. With deliberate fingers, he pulled out his phone and dialed my number. The room froze in silence as he waited. Halfway back to Boys, my phone rang. Seeing his name, I pulled over, my heart pounding. Eleanor, he said, his voice heavy but steady. You need to know what your brother really did. He told me everything. How the debt wasn't from a startup, but from gambling. How the money went to casinos, a BMW, and luxury trips. He explained how he had seen the family account transactions and overheard my father and brother scheming to force me to pay. My hands gripped the wheel, anger flaring but sharpened by clarity. They lied to you. My grandfather's voice softened. Your sister-in-law checked your savings. They all thought they could manipulate you. I closed my eyes, the betrayal cutting deeper than ever. I had doubted my brother's story, but hearing it laid out, the casinos, the lies, their plan to use me, made my stomach churn. His anger mirrored mine, steadying me. I couldn't let them get away with it, he said. Not after what they did to you. I whispered my thanks before hanging up. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty, but my thoughts burned. They had planned to ruin me, to take everything I had built. My father's wine, my mother's cold words, my brother's silence. It all made sense now. They weren't just desperate. They were deceitful, ready to sacrifice me to save themselves. Back in Boys, I threw myself into my routine. My apartment, small but mine, became my sanctuary. I focused on work, long hours at the office, where I had earned every cent of my savings. I started running again, the cold air clearing my head with every step. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their expectations dragging me down. For the first time in years, I felt light, as if I had shed a burden I had carried for too long. I wasn't the dutiful daughter or the responsible sister anymore. I was just me, and that was enough. Word about what happened spread fast. My grandfather didn't hold back after that night. He told my Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Simon, my mother's sister and brother-in-law, the whole story. How my brother's debt came from casinos, not some failed startup. How my father and mother tried to cover it up. How they turned on me when I refused to pay. Aunt Eleanor called me a week later, her voice soft but firm. We're on your side, she said. What they did was wrong. Uncle Simon, usually quiet, sent a text. You don't deserve that. Their support wasn't loud, but it was steady. A reminder that not everyone in the family had betrayed me. In Idaho Falls, things unraveled for them. My brother couldn't dodge the bank forever. The $250 he owed wasn't going away, and with no one to bail him out, he had to face it. He and my sister-in-law sold their house, a big flashy place they had bought to show off. I heard from Aunt Eleanor that it went for less than they hoped, barely enough to cover the debt. They moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, a far cry from the life they had flaunted. My brother's charm didn't work anymore. People in town whispered about his gambling, his recklessness. My sister-in-law kept her job at the bank, but her reputation took a hit. No one trusted someone who had pried into private accounts to manipulate family. My father and mother didn't fare much better. They had always been pillars in their community. At church events, charity drives, the works. But word got out, as it always does in small towns. Neighbors stopped inviting them to gatherings. Friends grew distant, their smiles polite but cold. Aunt Eleanor told me my mother tried to explain it away at a book club, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. The truth was too ugly. They had chosen to protect my brother's lies over their own daughter. Uncle Simon, who had always been close to my father, stopped visiting. He didn't say why, but the reason was clear. They had crossed a line, and the community they had leaned on for years turned its back. I didn't gloat. I didn't want to. Knowing they were paying for what they did didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me closure. I had spent years trying to hold the family together, always the one to compromise, to forgive. But that night in Idaho Falls changed everything. They had shown me who they really were, and I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their mess. I stopped checking my email for apologies that never came. I stopped waiting for them to change. My grandfather was the only one I kept in touch with, his calls a quiet comfort. He didn't push, didn't preach, just asked how I was and told me he was proud. Boys became my home in a way it hadn't before. I joined a running group, made a few friends who didn't know my family's story, and didn't need to. Work kept me busy, but it was more than that. I was building something for myself, something they couldn't touch. I opened a new savings account, one my sister-in-law would never see. Every deposit felt like a step forward, a brick in the wall I was building around my life. I wasn't rich, but I was secure, and that was mine to keep. Sometimes late at night, I would think about them. My father's angry glare, my mother's cold words, my brother's silence. The memories stung, but they didn't control me anymore. I had spent so long trying to be what they wanted, but now I was free to be what I wanted. I didn't need their house, their approval, or their lies. I had my own life, my own strength, and that was enough. Months passed in Boise, my days calm. I had settled into a rhythm that felt like mine alone. No calls from my mother, no texts from my father, no pleas from my brother. The silence was deliberate, a wall I had built to protect myself. My apartment, with its familiar creaks and warm light, was my refuge. I would wake early, run along the Boise River, the steady beat of my steps grounding me. Work filled my hours, each project a step toward a future I controlled. I wasn't running from the past, I was building beyond it. My grandfather was the only one I still talked to. His calls came every few weeks, his voice steady, asking about my day or sharing small updates. He never pushed me to forgive or forget, and I respected him for that. Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Simon checked in, too, their messages brief but kind, a quiet reminder of the family I hadn't lost. But my mother, father, my brother, my sister-in-law, they were gone from my life. I didn't check their social media, didn't ask about them. The hurt they had caused was a closed chapter, one I had no interest in reopening. Looking back, I realized how much I had learned. Family isn't a debt you owe forever. Sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most. Not because they're evil, but because they're flawed, caught in their own mistakes. I used to think love meant saying yes to every demand, fixing every problem. But that night in Idaho Falls taught me something different. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Walking away from my family's lies, their pressure, their betrayal was the hardest thing I had ever done. It was also the strongest. I'm proud of the life I have built. My savings are mine, earned through years of discipline. My friends, my routines, my choices, they're mine too. I don't carry the weight of my brother's debt or my parents' expectations anymore. I have learned to protect my peace, to value myself even when others don't. It's not about cutting people out to punish them. It's about choosing who gets to share your space, your energy. If you're watching this, think about your own boundaries. Maybe you're facing pressure from family, feeling guilt for saying no. Ask yourself, are they respecting you or are they using you? You don't have to carry their burdens to prove your love. Stand up for yourself, even if it's hard, even if it means walking away. You are worth it.